Helen is such an interesting and enigmatic character to me. On the one hand, she's very religious and she teaches religion to the slaves, as you mentioned. That's such an important part of the times, and yet she's also independent-minded enough to resist the suitors that her father presents to her, and she is independent-minded enough to run off with John. Where does that independence come from?
I think Helen is a really interesting character in that she has a very strong sense of duty and right and wrong, and that is derived not only from the time period and from what women were expected to do at that time, but also from her sense of responsibility to her father, Asa. So instead of being obsessed with marriage the way many other women might have been, she was concentrating on raising the people around her and working on the plantation as a laborer, as someone who could keep track of the books and help her father with the finances. And because her sense of duty is slightly different than other women of the time period, it allows her to come across as this very independent and strong-minded woman. And one of the things I love most about Helen is the way that sense of duty melts when she meets John. And it's clear that John is not the person her father wants her to marry. But in the face of that, all this sort of romanticism bubbles up in her, and it can't be stopped.
Right. And she's independent-minded enough and free-spirited enough to go ahead with it. And what's so interesting is how Helen and Tabitha parallel each other. Two daughters raised by fathers without mothers, and by fathers who don't quite know how to raise daughters. So they end up sort of learning some things on their own and able then to stand up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You find that right away, which I think is a lovely part of the novel.